Velvenreach's harbours were still bright with moon crystal lanterns when Althea reached the Ashen Grace at a clipped pace. Porters were already craning spellbound oar toward her open hatch. Quartermasters were already arguing over a manifest etched in Eldorian, its looping script elegant but unintelligible to most of the Meridian crew, who debated its contents with growing frustration. "Belay that load," Althea called, voice clean as a bell. "All of it." The crane-master leaned from his timber-rigging, brows furrowed. "Captain, these crates are bound for Cindermore. Priority seal from the portmaster." Althea stepped forward. "My seal outranks your schedule," she said flatly. "Strike the slings. This ship sails light." There was grumbling, a few oaths pitched low enough to be harmless, but Velvenreach respected economy and command, and the Ashen Grace's name carried both. In short order, the cargo nets swung back to the pier, the hatch batten slid home, and the decks were stripped to their working bones. "Hands aboard," Vash called, already at the helm, eyes measuring tide and wind like old adversaries. "Cast off fore and aft." Taran shouldered past the last of the porters to hook the final line. "2 days, fair wind," he muttered, half prayer, half prophecy. "Lanterns screened," Althea said. "No colours. We hug the shoals until the tidal gate, then give the open water its due." "Aye, Captain," Gideon answered, grin a bare flash in the gloom. He loosed the headsails, canvas bellied with a sigh. The Ashen Grace took the wind like a promise and slid from the alabaster quays, copper filigreed towers, dwindling to ivy-dark spires behind her. They kept to the coast until the reefs grew honest enough to trust. Past the tidal gate, the sea flattened into a hush that felt less like calm and more like listening. Even the ship's familiar chorus, block and tackle, line through sheave, plank, answering plank, seemed to quiet itself. The sky hung low, a lid of pewter pressed to the rim of the world. "Corsair waters start where men pretend they don't," Gideon said, softer than he meant to. "Then we'll pretend louder," Taran shot back, though his hands tightened on the coil at his hip. Althea paced the quarterdeck with a predator's economy. "Double watch," she ordered. "No wasted steps, no idle tongues. If fog rises, it does not sneak. We name it when we see it." They ran hard through the first night, lanterns hooded to a slit, deck talk stripped to the necessary. Vash held the wheel with the careful stubbornness of a man prepared to wrestle the horizon. The current had a mind of its own, a contrary tug at the keel, a nudge that disagreed with star and chart both. "Feels like someone thinking about us," he said once, and Althea only nodded. Silas took the first watch as ordered. He moved quietly as ever, a shadow among shadows. At first it was the small tells, the way he blinked too slowly beneath the hooded light, the way his hand lingered on the rail, as if it were warmer than his skin. When he looked east, toward the line where the northern Meridian Sea butted the Elmerian, a taste like old iron touched his tongue and wouldn't leave. "You're pale," Vash murmured as Silas came off the bow. "Velvenreach tea," Silas lied with a slight smile. "Too much leaf." Vash let it pass. Silas always lived a step to the side of other men's weather. But as midnight cooled toward dawn, the air seemed to thicken around him. Lantern light wavered, and for a blink his shadow lagged behind his body, and then overshot and snapped back. He steadied a coil of line and swallowed hard. By second bell, the sea grew stranger. Unmarked buoys bobbed where no chart claimed them, stones wrapped in net, listening more than floating. A single gull paced the ship at a careful distance, as if disinclined to share their luck. "Mark that buoy," Althea said. "We're seeing someone's handwriting." "Aye." Taran chalked its angle on the rail in quick, neat strokes. "Set like a fish line across drift." Silas bent to check the lash at a belaying pin and froze. The shadow pooling under the pin didn't just darken, it leaned, a subtle tilt that pointed unmistakably north-northeast, toward Tidewatch Haven. He blinked, and it was only shadow again. Heat crawled behind his eyes. "Water," he said too quickly and straightened. By sunrise he had sweat on his temples, though the air was knife-cool. He wrapped his scarf higher, blaming the wind. He tightened the cuffs of his coat, blaming the cold. The deck underfoot rolled like any sea, but his bones swore the ship kept stepping sideways in a rhythm no wave made. On the second day, the line between seas announced itself by refusing to be a line at all. The northern meridian pressed low and heavy, the Elmirian rolled thin and bright, both neither each. The Ashen Grace's wake braided into patterns that made Taran scowl and replot. "Took a fix on the stars before dawn," Taran muttered. "Compass is arguing. Stars say one thing, Needle says a joke." "Trust the stars," Althea replied. "Needles can be persuaded." Silas tried to keep to the quiet jobs, galley fire, fenders, the small attentions that keep a ship from deciding you don't deserve her. Each task left him a little more hollowed. He gripped the railing longer than a man needs to, willing the deck to stop humming under his palm. He told himself it was only nerves. He told himself not to taste the iron. Gideon caught him bracing at the mainmast and pitched his voice low. "You seasick now? I'll paint you a bucket, Turn Whisperer." "Not sick," Silas said. His smile showed and vanished. "Just listening." "To what?" Silas stared past the bow. "Something that doesn't want to be found and doesn't plan to be lost." It got harder to hide. When he crossed from lantern to shadow, the breath hitched in his lungs as if the air had turned to water for the span of a heartbeat. A fever found him in fits, heat skating his skin, cold nesting in his joints. He dabbed his brow at the scuppers and called it spray. Vash saw the tremor in his hands when he tied off a simple cleat hitch. "You're coming off deck," he said under his breath. "I can work," Silas answered. He could. It just cost. Althea's eyes, sharp on everything and sharper where men tried not to be seen, found him by mid-afternoon. She didn't call him out in front of the crew. She altered the roster with a few clean strokes of charcoal, shifted him to half-watch and lighter tasks, sent Gideon to the foretop and Taran to the starboard lines. No one argued. The order settled like a blanket. When the sun sagged toward a rim of cloud, the color of bruised fruit, the sea went quieter still. Not calm, hushed. Unmarked wreckage drifted past, scraps of rope, planks half-shaved by sea teeth, a broken bell iron with no sound to offer. "Edge of their hunting ground," Gideon muttered, more to the deck than to anyone who might answer. "Then we don't splash," Althea said. "Sound travels like gossip here." Silas leaned into the rail, breath ragged. Somewhere ahead, he felt it now, a slow throb under the waterline, not sound but pressure. There was a center, not a place, a decision. His fever spiked and he closed his eyes against a brief tilt in the world. "Silas." Althea's voice was beside him without warning. She had a small earthen cup in her hand. "Fever grass and willow bark. Drink." He took it, guilt in his throat with the bitter. "I'm well enough." "You're useful to me, vertical," she said, not unkindly. "Drink, then lie in the lee for a bell. Vash has the wheel. If anything on this sea decides to stand up and walk, I'll ring the deck with a hammer." He drank. The heat in him didn't leave, but it stepped back a pace. He sank to the lee as ordered, resentment tempered by relief, and watched the Ashen Grace cut a thinner and thinner path between seas that had no intention of letting a ship pass unpriced. By last light the horizon ahead thickened, fog gathering where fog had no business being, not rolling but rising, as if someone were pulling a sheet up from below. Vash's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "Captain." "I see it," Althea said, her jaw set. "Screen the lanterns to a thread, no bells. If it comes to meet us, we walk through it on our feet." Silas sat up, the fever's whisper turning into a tug that ran from the base of his skull to the tips of his fingers. In the corner of his eye, the shadows under the rail leaned again, all in one direction. north-northeast. Toward the place a crate had slipped down into the dark like a secret choosing its audience. The fog ahead kept rising like a lifted sheet. Wind slacked without dying. The sea lay so still the wake forgot to fray. By second bell afternoon on the second day, the Ashen Grace moved through a hush that did not belong to weather. Silas stopped pretending. He caught the rail by the starboard shrouds and said, too loud for a man like him, "We're not alone." Gideon glanced over, half a grin ready to ease it. It died. Silas's face was bloodless. Sweat glazed his brow despite the cold. Not a ship, Silas pressed on, eyes fixed north-northeast. Not one presence. Hundreds. No. More. Like a city under us, listening. They don't like us here. His voice thinned. We should turn back. Althea came down from the quarterdeck. What do you feel? She asked. No dismissal, only the clean demand for detail. Silas's fingers tightened on the rail. Weight. Pressure in the water like a heartbeat that's not the sea's. Shadows leaning one way. Every time the lantern sways, it points the same direction. He swallowed hard. It's wrong for us. Here. We are seen. We are marked. Taran's jaw worked. Vash didn't let go of the wheel. Althea's gaze went from Silas's trembling hands to the fog bank and back. We're close, she said, as much to herself as to them. Close is the same as wrong until it's done. Silas shook his head once, urgent, and the world tilted for him. He swayed. Gideon caught his shoulder. Fever flushed and fled his face in a breath. You're off the deck, Althea said, already signalling. Bunk. That's an order. You can be useful when your legs remember you, she said, not unkindly, and to Vash and Gideon. See him down. Then back to stations. Silas tried to finish a warning. They don't want to be found, Captain, and they don't plan to be lost. But the sentence slid apart. He was half carried below, fever whispering in his ears like distant oars. They found it by what the sea chose to return. First came tarred rope shaved by chain shot, then a hatchboard with 3 nail holes and a smear of that strange cold soot Bram had worn. Then a bell with its tongue torn out, bumping the hull with a sound like a swallowed cough. The scent changed. Iron and old smoke under salt. Taran spread a damp, oil-splotched sketch on the quarterdeck rail. Bram's marks, copied in Velvenreach by a harbour scribe with quick hands. Widow's tongue reef etched like a hooked finger, a dotted drift line from the last lantern when it consented to burn, and a crude X where Bram swore they'd lashed the crate. Althea weighed the drawing against the lean of the current and the sulking needle. Grid it, she said, slow and patient, grapnels first, eyes second. They worked the day into a net. Vash and Gideon took turns on the line and in the water. They stripped to weighted belts, knives at calves, line to waist, 3 tugs to lift, 2 to shift, 1 to breathe again, and slipped over the side into cold that bit to the bone and then settled, dead still, around them. Below, the world narrowed to grey-green and the sound of blood in the ears. Silt bloomed at a touch and hung like sleep. Broken lengths of spar lay like ribs. Once, Vash's hand found a blackened barb lodged in a seam of rock. It felt colder than the water, and where his glove brushed its edge, his palm prickled with a numb ache that travelled up his arm. He let it go and signalled up with a hard jerk of the line. They mapped the bottom with hands and rope and patience. Between dives, Gideon shivered hard by the galley fire and went again, jaw set like he could chew the cold and make it smaller. Taran stood watch with a lead line, tallow to take the sea's fingerprint, sand stuck soft, shells scraped, grit told true. He called out the changes like a litany. Vash shifted the grid by inches. Silas woke twice in his bunk with the fever tugging him by the spine. The second time he lurched up the ladder half wild and caught Vash by the sleeve at the rail. East by a quarter, he said, breathless. Deeper. It's holding its breath there. Vash didn't argue. He passed the bearing to Taran. Taran chalked it on the rail. Althea nodded once and adjusted the run. On the next drop, the sea finally gave what it had been sitting on. Gideon's foot brushed a shape that didn't belong to water or stone. He stilled, fingers spread. Lead wrap under silt, iron band cold as night, a corner no rock ever made. He cleared mud with the edge of his hand, until letters showed, half-worn, stamped in relief. A blindfolded sun. Beside it, pressed crooked into the lead, a simple knot mark he had seen on dispatch boards bound up the Tidal Gate. He whooped once into his teeth, swallowed the sound and hammered the lift signal, 3 hard tugs, again and again. The parbuckle lines bit. The coffer peeled from the bottom with a reluctance that felt personal. She rose slow, shedding silt in dusky veils, and bumped the hull with a dull, satisfied thud. 6 hands and a curse brought her over the rail and onto the deck. The iron bands were furred with salt. The lead sweated cold. Up close, it was smaller than the crew's speculation had made it, coffer-sized, not coffin, but no lighter for that. Vash laid a palm on the metal. It thrummed faintly as if something inside counted heartbeats and refused to match them. Gideon blew water from his nose and grinned around chattering teeth. Tell me we did not just wrestle up some witch's lunchbox. No one tell it what time it is, Taran said, half serious, staring at the blindfolded sun. Althea didn't smile. She set her hand on the lid where the seal ran and felt the cold climb to meet her. For a brief, treacherous instant, the ship beneath her seemed to still, as if stretching to listen. "Lash it to the mainmast," she said. "No one opens a thing until we're off this line and out of fog. Then we'll see what my uncle thought worth a week of warship's patience." Below decks, Silas lay with his eyes open, fever quiet for the first time since they'd left Velvenreach. In the sway of the lantern above him, his shadow pointed at the deck overhead. North-northeast, toward a coffer that had come up from the dark like a secret deciding it would be told. They turned the Ashen Grace's bow south by west, Velvenreach a promise written in starlight and habit. The coffer lay lashed fore of the mainmast, iron bands sweating cold, its blindfolded sun dim under salt. For an hour the sea permitted the pretense of an easy homeward run. Then the water began to disagree. It wasn't a gust or a rogue swell, it was a draw, a steady hand beneath the keel, urging her a point, then 2, then 3 toward the east. Vash felt it first in the wheel, resistance where there should have been give. A quiet insistence, as if another helmsman below were setting his own course. "Current's wrong," he said, "not charted, not earned." Taran checked the lead line and scowled. "Depth says one thing, drift says another. We're being walked sideways." Wreck came to meet them far from any honest lane, a shaved length of tarred rope, a short length of shattered spar, a hatchboard smeared with that cold soot Bram had worn. An unmarked buoy bobbed against the set of the wind. Nothing but a stone in a net, yet it kept station like it knew the job. A bell floated past with its tongue torn out and knocked the hull with a dull, hollow sound, as if trying to speak without permission. "Someone lays their lines here," Gideon muttered. "This isn't wreckage, it's handwriting." "Eyes on the water," Althea ordered. "Lanterns screened to a slit. No loud surprises. If they're watching, let them mark shadows." Silas came up from below, colour leached from his skin, fever damp at the hairline. He made it to the rail, braced there and stared ahead as if the fog would answer him back. "They know," he said, voice thin but certain. "They don't care who we are. It's what we took. They felt it move. We lifted it, and they felt the weight move. Not one presence, hundreds. Like a city below us turning to look. We should turn back." "We are turning," Althea said, gentled without softening, one eye on the compass as it twitched and sulked. "The sea disagrees." Silas's knees sagged. Gideon caught him before the deck could. For a heartbeat the lantern's flame guttered blue. The shadow under Silas's feet leaned, all of it pointing the same way the current pulled. "You're done for now," Althea said. "Bunk." "That's not a suggestion." He tried to say more. "They don't plan to be lost." And the rest broke into a breath. Gideon and Vash saw him down. When they returned, the hush had deepened. Even the Grace's creak seemed to hold their breath. The wake closed too quickly behind them, as if discouraged. Somewhere in the fog, a gull called once and thought better of it. "Hold her," Althea said low. "If the current insists, let it strain. We give it inches, not miles." Vash set his jaw and leaned into the wheel. The pull answered like a rope on the other end of a rope. The unmarked buoys thinned into two that lay too neatly opposed, as if marking a gate none of their charts admitted existed. Beyond, the fog rose, not rolling but lifting sheet by sheet, to make a corridor where no corridor should be. The needle quivered, changed its mind, quivered again. The sense of eyes on them thickened until even Gideon, who laughed at fear like it owed him coin, fell silent. He frowned at the deck, then at the water, as if trying to catch a lie in motion. "Feels like we're picking up speed," he muttered. "But no wind, no change in the sails, like something's tugging us from below." Althea's hand found the rail. It was subtle at first, just a tension, a lean, but the ship was being pulled, not driven. She felt it like a thread drawn taut beneath her palm. "Steady," she said, "for the crew, for the ship, for the thing lashed to her deck. We ride our course." The Ashen Grace answered with a groan that wasn't complaint so much as resolve. The current tugged harder, a patient, unmistakable persuasion from below, and the chapter closed on the knife edge of that argument, the ship's will against an unseen hand, while the fog ahead parted just enough to suggest there was indeed a way through.